Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be playing a song for you called Yardbird Suite. It was written by Charlie Bird Parker, the great saxophonist. And you would call it a bebop tune. In other words, it has a lot of notes and a lot of bebop type rhythm and that sort of thing. And then I'm going to improvise on it for a couple of choruses. And later on I'm going to talk about some of the things I'm doing with the improv, and I'm going to be also using a metronome. I'm going to start out without the metronome. And I want you to see the difference or hear the difference using the metronome, and I want you to sort of learn what the value of the metronome is. So I'll talk about that later on. But here we go now with the first version of Yardbird Suite. Here's the metronome set at 96 for the 2 and 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the use of the metronome. You could hear the difference between the two versions. The version with the metronome perhaps sounds a little stiff and not relaxed. Part of the reason for that is that you're adjusting to the time of the metronome. Particularly when improvising, there's a tendency when you're playing off the beat rhythm like that within improvisation to rush the tempo. So you have to sit back on the tempo. But the problem with the first version is that it does rush. If you compare the tempo from the beginning of the song to the end, you're going to see that it's faster at the end, and that's usually the case even when you play with bands where you have a rhythm section. They all do it, but you know, even Michael Brecker said in a clinic he was doing in Texas that he had to practice with a metronome, and it always irritated him because he always found out he was rushing. So even the greats do that. So this is something that takes getting used to. Now, one of the first things you want to do is you want to be looking at how you're playing eighth notes. So in this song, the eighth notes are, they go like this. Now here's a set of eighth notes. Now if they're even, they're like this. If they're swing eighths, they're like this. And if they're like Dixieland eighths or ragtime eighths, they're like this. It's more bouncy. In other words, it has more of like a, I'd call a dotted eighth note to a 16th. And the even eighth notes, of course, are just the way they're written. These are even eighths. Swing eighths. So that's an important thing to get with the eighth notes. The other phrase that's in the melody and the bridge is, so that again, even eighths, Dixieland eighths, and then swing eighths. The swing eighths tend to have more of a legato sound. I always try to play more legato on the eighth notes. So now using the metronome, see now I have to really sort of feel sitting in the pocket of the tempo, like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So one thing I do when using the metronome is I listen to it carefully and try to feel what I'm doing in synchronizing with the metronome. I can adjust as I go along. If I go a little bit ahead, I can adjust back by just sitting back a little bit. You know, a lot of times with this, if you have a tendency to rush all the time, you just want to try to sit back on the beat and relax more. It's not easy. A good way to practice with the metronome is to leave some space so that you can hear and listen to the metronome in between the notes, sort of like, maybe like this. So I'm going to play on the tune. I'll show you the same technique on the tune. It's like a tap dancer. Just comping. Just keep it simple until you get used to what it feels like. Now, you might have to start by playing on quarter notes. So like you double the tempo. For an up-tempo tune, that's not so easy, but double the tempo here. That's on quarter notes now. It doesn't really swing that way, but at least you have that. Quarter notes are better on ballads, but now the other way, if you go back to 96 again, it's about there. You can start by putting it on the 1 and 3, if that's easier, like this. 3, 4. See, that doesn't swing. You really need it on 2 and 4 in order for it to swing. This might be 96 here. That takes some getting used to. So you might want to practice by starting out at slower tempos. Like you can do this tune at a slower tempo. Let's take it down a bit. Now I'm going to count. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's easier now. I'm going to talk about some other techniques that I'm using, and you might want to refer back to a video I did on Now's the Time, the Blues by Charlie Parker, and I talked about 5 essential elements of improvisation. So I'm not going to repeat that whole video in this, repeat everything I said in that video. I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. First of all, most of this tune I'm playing in a spread voicing technique. That way I can get a bigger sound, and I can also fill out the bass, particularly with the piano solo version I'm doing here now. With a group or a bass player, you might want to move the voicings to the left hand up higher like this. Like that. So on. But I was playing spread voicing to fill out, to get a fuller sound like this. So I'm using mostly tenths or roots, like, you know, root and tenth, or root and seventh. Sometimes root and third. And then adding some harmony in the right hand. Now eventually I get into soloing. Now I'm going up to rootless voicings up here. So you might want to look at my tutorial on rootless voicing to see how I'm coming up with this, but that's what's happening here. Then I get into this block chord type of left hand with the right hand playing in octaves like this. It's kind of like the Red Garland sound. Really nice sound. And the other thing I was doing was the chordal, some of what you would call the locked hand chordal, like this type of thing, and just more spread voicings. Okay, so you want to start practicing your jazz tunes with a metronome. And then see if you can play without the metronome, and see if your playing has improved in terms of your time. Just compare the 2 versions, and that's a really good thing to do. So I'm going to wrap up by saying the main thing I wanted to cover in this video was the use of the metronome. I also talked about that in previous videos, but I wanted to show you and compare the difference of what the 2 versions sound like, the one with the metronome, the one without. And then you want to try to do that as a good exercise for yourself. You can play tunes or exercises or 2-5-1s or whatever, but use the metronome and try to get it on 2 and 4, and then see after a while how your timing has improved. So if this has been helpful, please let me know. Send me a comment or a thumbs up, and I appreciate it. I'll see you next time around. Take care. Bye-bye.